This is Jim Inkster, your moderator, and we're in the sixth year of doing this, 62 programs of Ask the Governor, and this is the first one in studio in 14 months because of COVID, and we will talk about that with Governor John Bel Edwards. And again, if you would like to join the conversation, your number for Ask the Governor is 877-217-5757. Matt Doyle is producing. Jerry Mayer of Hometown Productions is here, and so you will be seeing this program in many places after it airs because Jerry's reach is far and wide on television stations across Louisiana. This program is heard in several states in the South because of the reach of the stations, and some are actually located in other states. So we're glad you're with us. And before we get to the matters of the day, this week, as of Monday, former Governor Buddy Roemer died, age 77. Served our state from 1988 to 1992. Only a one-term governor, but a character, and I know somebody you counseled with when you were thinking about running for governor.
I did, and first of all, he was also a four-term congressman.
That is correct.
From North Louisiana, his home base of Shreveport-Bossier. But I sought out the counsel of all the living former governors when I was, I guess it'd be hard to get the counsel of one who wasn't living at the time, but I did, and he was gracious enough to visit with me not once but twice, and shared his ideas about where Louisiana was at that time and what needed to happen in order to move it forward. And I just remember him being very generous with his time and very, very pleasant to talk to, even though there were obviously some philosophical differences between Mr. Roemer and myself. He could not have been nicer.
And since you were elected in 2015, 3 Louisiana governors have died. In Kathleen Blanco, Mike Foster, and now Buddy Roemer. And at one time, you had them all together at the mansion.
We did. It was a few years ago, and Donna had the idea to get the families and all the former living governors who'd ever lived at the current governor's mansion to come over one evening, kind of tell stories about the time that they were in office. And then she had rocking chairs made up for each of the governors with the state seal and the years that they served. And it was great. We had Governor Jindal there, Governor Edwards, Governor Blanco. We had Governor Roemer and Governor Foster all there that night. And little did we know that it wouldn't be long after that. And 3 of those individuals have passed.
Only 3 governors standing now in Louisiana. And to put that in perspective, there are more U.S. presidents alive than there are governors of Louisiana. And one was born in 1971, and Bobby Jindal, the governor today, John Bel Edwards in 1966, and then there's Edwin Edwards, who was born in 1928.
And will probably outlive all of us.
Well, he's hung in there a long time, and as we know, he has had a full life. Now, since we last joined you, LSU hired a president and chancellor, and William Tate IV, the University of South Carolina provost, who becomes the first person of color to lead a university in the Southeastern Conference. Your thoughts?
Well, I will tell you that I've had an opportunity to talk to Bill Tate, and Dr. Tate is a very remarkable individual, and I think he's got a stellar record in higher education, having served at the highest levels with distinction. And, I'm looking forward to working with him. As you know, LSU has a number of challenges that it's dealing with right now, and going back, Title IX issues and so forth. And I know that he brings the experience, the skill set, and I think the right temperament and judgment based on the conversations that I've had with him to really move the system forward. And so I do look forward to working with him.
Symbolically, it means a great deal.
Well, I think it does. I was watching a PBS special, Ken Burns, on baseball, and this was just this past weekend, and it was how difficult it was to get the first African American player into the major leagues, and all the arguments for and against it and so forth, and turn on the game today, and so clearly at some point it was going to happen. I'm proud that it has happened, but at the end of the day, and this is what Dr. Tate told me. He wants to have a long, very successful run at LSU, but he wants, when he leaves, to be known not as the first African-American president of the LSU system. He wants to be known as one of the best that ever served. And I think that's the exact right attitude to come into the position with.
And before we get to legislative matters, more weather issues in Louisiana. You've dealt with a flurry of them over the last 5.5 years, and flooding in various parts of the state, including the one we're in, but also Lake Charles hit hard once again.
Yeah, and look, my heart breaks for everybody, and whether your home flooded for the first time yesterday, the day before, or whether it's the third time, it doesn't matter. I mean, your life is really been turned upside down. But those folks in southwest Louisiana, when you think about Hurricane Laura, the strongest hurricane to hit in over 150 years, and then a few weeks later, Delta makes landfall no more than 15 miles from where Laura made landfall, and it was primarily a water event, and Laura was a wind event, and then you had the winter storm, and throughout this you've had the pandemic, and now you've got this flood event. It really is tragic, and please don't drive in water that is standing on the roads when you don't know for a 100% absolute certainty that it's safe to do so, because we've had a number of fatalities in this particular event, and I will tell you, most of them have to do with driving in high water.
And you have dealt with a few of these going back to your first year in office.
Yeah, and you know, I was talking to Gail McGovern today. She heads the American Red Cross, and she was telling me how much the Red Cross enjoys working with Louisiana in times of disaster, and how professional all of the players are. And it's because we have a lot of experience, and we have a really good team. But I would rather have less experience at managing disasters than we've had. But at the end of the day, you don't get to pick and choose. The good Lord sends it your way, and you have to deal with it.
And pleased to have Governor John Bel Edwards in the House, and I know many of you want to talk with him about legislative matters and perhaps some other things. And if you're so inclined, 877-217-5757. Story today, the state's business lobby is calling on the governor with the worker shortage impacting businesses to discontinue the state's use of federal enhanced unemployment benefits. Is this something that is practical in these times?
Well, we're trying to figure that out, what's right for Louisiana. It's still a minority of states that have announced that they're going to discontinue. Some have already done it. Some are going to do it in the future at a date certain. What I want to do is make sure that it would be right for Louisiana, and I don't want to rush into this, because what I can tell you is none of the states that have done it already are as dependent upon tourism to sustain their economy as we are, and we know that tourism hasn't come back to pre-pandemic levels or anywhere close to it, and so it appears to me that the case may be different, and so we want to get an economist to take a look at this and see whether there's a net benefit or a net cost to continuing to receive these benefits, which go through September the 6th, by the way. The enhanced $300 a week benefit go through September the 6th. So we're going to take a look at it. And I did receive a letter from those business interests that you mentioned just before I left the governor's mansion and headed over to the studio.
Last time you were in studio, it was March of 2020, and you imposed the stay-at-home order on March 16th. And at that time, you said it would be about a year-and-a-half event. We're 14 months into it. Seems like that time frame is pretty much on target, but where are we right now?
Well, we're certainly doing much better. You know, I'm here with you because we've had our vaccine. I want to thank you and Jerry for taking the vaccine. Otherwise, I wouldn't be back today. But the three safe and effective vaccines that we have in Louisiana today at more than 1,500 locations where people can be vaccinated, we really need more people to receive the vaccination so that we can move through this pandemic and put it behind us and achieve even more normalcy. But there are still challenges. I mean, the pandemic continues. There were 9 additional deaths announced today. We're now 1,509 since the beginning. I'm sorry, 10,509 total deaths. You know, but our percent positivity has been hanging right around 3%. We've had right around 300 people in the hospital for the last number of weeks. So we seem to be stable. The best news of all is that those people, it appears that those people who need the vaccine the most, those most vulnerable because of age and comorbid health conditions, are the ones most likely to get it. You know, so for example, 71% of the people in Louisiana 65 and older have had the vaccine, and even more. It's more than that. Have had at least one shot. We're getting, you know, more than 75% of them have already started this series. but it's now available for anyone 12 years old and older. I really do encourage people to get a vaccine, and there's a good chance if they haven't gotten one yet, they're hesitant, and I'm not going to be able to convince them. So I'm asking you now, please go talk to your doctor and ask whatever questions you have, so that you will, hopefully become confident in the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine.
I saw East Baton Rouge Parish DA Hiller Moore a few minutes before showtime, and he asked me to ask you about this bill that has been weaving its way through the process at the Capitol that would prohibit any penalties for those who violated your orders during the COVID crisis. What do you make of this legislation?
Well, like I normally do, I say I'll if it makes it to my desk, I'll take a look at it, because it still could be amended several times between now and then. I never believed that we were going to be able to enforce our way through the pandemic. We needed people to be good citizens and good neighbors. But that doesn't mean that people who were repeat violators and just insisted on doing things that were unreasonably dangerous for themselves and their customers, for example, that they should be able to do that with impunity. So I would not be inclined to sign such a piece of legislation if it went too far. And I'll just see what kind of balance it strikes, and I can't make a commitment one way or the other today.
And lastly, before we go to the phone lines, what about the concealed carry measure that is also heading its way through the ranks at the Capitol?
Yeah, I've got a long record on this type of legislation. I've never supported it as a legislator or as governor. I think we have the right balance in place right now, so that if you want to engage in concealed carry, you can do that, but you go get a permit. We need to make sure that you know what the law is, you know what safety measures are required to responsibly be a gun owner and carry a gun. We make sure that you have some marksmanship training, and you have a legal obligation, and you know it, to tell a law enforcement officer that you have a concealed weapon on your person when you have that interaction. And that serves to make sure that there's less incidents that blow up. And you also have to pass a background check. I think that's the right balance to strike. I know that the overwhelming majority of the people in Louisiana also believe that that's the right balance. And so it's those bills are not bills that I can support.
Michelle in New Orleans, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you so much. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bell Edwards.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. My question is about air pollution. In my community for several years, there's been regularly inundation with toxic fumes. LDEQ has identified the polluter as BWC in Harvey, was formerly Blackwater, but they haven't taken any action to stop this.
Michelle, what I need you to do is please give your name and number to us so that we can contact you back. I'm not familiar with that particular situation in Harvey, but I can get with Dr. Chuck Carr Brown, who is the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Quality, and make sure that we get back in touch with you on that one.
Thank you, Michelle. I believe it's Abbas and Kenner. Abbas, you're on Ask the Governor.
Yes, Mayor. Yes, Mr. Governor. I moved from Virginia to New Orleans. I invested $500,000 on purchasing a house, and I have invested $120,000 to open a business. There is ditches in my street. The water goes under my house. I've been calling the public work for almost 1 year. I'm not able to contact anybody or anybody to return my call.
Okay, Abbas, again, like I told Michelle, please give us your name and number. I don't know whether you live on it doesn't sound like you live on a state highway where one of my agencies would be primarily responsible for the drainage in that particular area, but I will make sure that we reach out to you, find out where you live, and then try to put you into contact with someone who can help. And I think you said New Orleans, but I believe we had you down as a Kenner caller. But we'll get all that straight and try to get you connected to someone who can help.
James in Longview, Texas. James, welcome back. Good to hear your voice.
Well, good to hear you, and good to hear you, Governor Edwards. Glad you're both in the studio. Anyhow, basically my question is, Governor Edwards, I was reading where you were wanting to join the U.S. Climate Alliance, and I'm not too familiar with that organization. I know its goals to, quote, become carbon neutral. My question is, do the states pay membership dues to belong to that, and what is the ultimate objective? Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, James. It is good to be talking to you again. So you're invited to join the Climate Alliance. It's a group of governors. And if there are dues, it is a very nominal amount. And I really don't know the answer to that question. But we had already committed ourselves 2 years ago through a Climate Initiatives Task Force goal to be neutral in terms of CO2 emissions and have that net zero by 2050 relative to the 2005 levels. And so that's something we had already embraced. I think that's what the Alliance is looking for. And so it's kind of one of those strange things. And I was talking about this last week. I don't know if you saw it when I testified in the U.S. Senate Energy Committee. I'm the chairman of the OCS Governors Alliance, and I'm also a member of the Climate Alliance, and I don't see any real dichotomy there. I think they go hand in hand for reasons that would probably take too long to go into now. But Louisiana is at the forefront of the struggle against climate change in the United States, and if you just look at sea level rise, subsidence, coastal erosion, all of those things, and I think it's incumbent on us to take a leadership position in the country, especially since we have the fifth highest amounts of carbon dioxide emissions in the country and number one on a per capita basis.
877-217-5757. A line is open for the first time in a while for Governor John Bel Edwards. We'll return to the phone lines, but you mentioned going to Washington, and also the president made a trip to Louisiana. So that is interesting because, as we know, this is a state that has gone largely Republican statewide with the exception of you. But why did Joe Biden come to Louisiana?
He came to Lake Charles, and the backdrop for his press conference, if you remember, was the Cowshay River Bridge, the I-10 bridge there in Lake Charles, and talking about old infrastructure that really prevents us from moving forward and being as competitive as we can be economically. But we're also talking about safety and quality of life. That bridge is 70 years old, and it predates the I-10. It was part of the old, I guess it would have been the US 90 highway, and it's well past the time to be replaced. And so he came there with that as a backdrop. And it is one of the most pressing infrastructure issues we have in Louisiana. So we appreciate him coming to Louisiana to do that, especially to Lake Charles, where we could also talk about hurricane recovery, which we still need an appropriation out of Congress in order to make that effective.
We go to Lafayette, and I believe it's Azure. Good afternoon. You're on with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Good afternoon. I just have a question in regards to theft. My purse, and in a woman's purse, you have everything that belongs to you. Is there any laws set up to where we can make it necessary or required to use identification when we're using a debit card and that individual would just press the credit?
All right. What about steps to thwart theft in cases of robbery and the like?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I understood enough about that situation or the question to be able to respond appropriately. So, Azure, I'm going to ask you to give your name, and we'll contact you on that one. And I don't know whether you were a victim of identity theft or there was something else going on there. But if you will give us your information, I'll have somebody reach out to you.
Thank you, Azure. Charlotte in New Iberia. Charlotte, you're on with Governor Edwards. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for allowing me to ask my question of the governor. Governor, what can be done to get the Louisiana court systems to retry cases where the accused was sentenced without the conviction of a unanimous jury?
All right.
Charlotte, that's a great question. Of course, that's in the news this week with the U.S. Supreme Court, which recently held that you had to have a unanimous jury in order to reach a valid verdict on felony cases. And in Louisiana, since the current Constitution was put into place, allowed for 10-2. We changed that by vote of the people in constitutional amendment a couple of years ago. The question before the court most recently was what happens to all those people convicted of a felony with less than a unanimous vote of the jury, and they came back and said, well, does not apply retroactively. So at this point, DAs can do it, and the legislature can pass a bill, which they actually have one pending to address this.
877-217-5757, and I'm getting some emails at the address I used for another show, and one is about the situation at the med school in Shreveport. Is that being addressed properly?
Well, it's currently being addressed in terms of the previous chancellor has been suspended or removed from that position. I think you're going to see the LSU board. They've already indicated that they've developed a policy where a nationwide search for chancellor positions is going to be required anytime you have a situation like you did there, where an individual is put in on an interim basis without having had a search, that their contracts are not just going to be extended. And of course, you have additional issues up there with now litigation and additional allegations of improprieties regarding the previous chancellor. So I have confidence that LSU is going to navigate through this appropriately and do the investigation and make the changes that are warranted. And look, we have an opportunity, I believe, because since I've become governor, we have worked really hard to stabilize the situation at the medical school in Shreveport with the partnership with Oxner. And I can tell you the medical school is stronger now in terms of its financing, in terms of its faculty, the growth, the patient volume, where they're training and educating their doctors and other allied health professionals up there. And now we need to make sure that we have the absolute best chancellor that we can have to grow that program and make it as prominent as it can be across the country. And I think that's going to happen in short order.
On our show a month ago, you indicated you would refrain from getting involved, at least as in selecting the president and chancellor of LSU. And it turned out to be a competitive battle between Bill Tate and Jim Henderson. Did you offer advice and counsel, or did you just say, look, the board members are there to make this call?
No, my position on that is that once I appoint and the Senate confirms, then you have a constitutional body, the LSU Board of Supervisors, and it's their job to make that determination. I didn't call and offer, and I wasn't asked by any of those 15 members who it is that I preferred or would want them to vote for. And I told them privately the same thing that I've said publicly. I wanted them to pick the very best president for university that we can pick, given the challenges and the opportunities that face that university today. They went through the process, and Dr. Tate was selected, and I look forward to working with him.
Aiden in Baton Rouge, you're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bell Edwards. Hi, Aiden.
As you know, Governor, President Biden signed an executive order to create the Civilian Climate Corps, and I was just wondering how young Louisianians like myself could get involved in this program.
Yeah, I am not. Aiden, first of all, thank you very much for the call, and thank you for your interest in that program and in being involved. I am not familiar with the Civilian Climate Corps. But I will make sure that we get you an answer if you will give us your contact information. And if it's an executive order, I'm not sure that stood the program up completely, but it may have. But we'll figure out what's out there, what's available to you, and get back with you.
Move to legalize recreational marijuana hit a speed bump in the House yesterday, falling 23 votes short of the 70 needed. Were you following that one?
Yeah, certainly I was following it, and did not take a public position on the bill this year. In the past, as a legislator and as governor, I've been opposed to legalizing recreational marijuana. I will tell you, I have come to believe that it is going to happen in Louisiana eventually. And one of the things that I've always said is that before we do it here, we need to make sure we study and learn all the lessons to be learned in those states that have legalized marijuana, what mistakes they made, what they got right, how we can minimize any adverse impact, how we can maximize any benefits. And I think there's a growing number of people who are sort of where I am, And so not quite comfortable yet, but understanding we're likely to get there in the next several years. And so we want to make sure that we do it right. And I suspect you're going to see a lot of interest in studying the other states and making sure that we have a clear path forward. There, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's also some movement on medical marijuana to make sure that additional forms are available upon the recommendation of a doctor. And also there's a movement to decriminalize the possession of very small amounts of marijuana. And so it appears that regardless of party, regardless of race, and regardless of income, attitudes around marijuana are changing across the country and here in Louisiana.
What's your assessment, Governor, of efforts in other states, some of which have been successful, to change election laws?
Yeah, well, first of all, oddly enough, there have been a couple of states that have liberalized things like absentee voting and voting by mail, and other states have made it more restrictive. I'm not aware of a single credible case in Louisiana over the last number of years where there has been any impropriety or fraud on any scale that would warrant a change in our election laws. And I certainly wouldn't want to do it because people have been convinced that there was wide-scale fraud in the last presidential election, because I think somewhere close to 90 courts, state and federal, have said that didn't happen. The Attorney General who worked for President Trump said that didn't happen. You have secretaries of state and local county and parish officials, Republican and Democrat, all over the country, who say it didn't happen, and I've not seen any evidence. And so it would be unfortunate if we allow people's concern to drive change when the concern is caused by people making incredible claims that just are totally unsupported by the facts. So I don't look for us to do anything in Louisiana this year that would make it harder for people to register to vote or to actually cast a vote, and I don't think there's anything that warrants such action in Louisiana.
When you were a soldier in Hawaii, for the most part, did you vote by mail?
I did, and the whole time I was a soldier, and at West Point, and voted by mail, and I probably have cast. Well, I'm trying to think about it now. About the same number of votes by mail as I have in person, just based on the fact that I was gone for so long, and my vote was always cast on time. I don't think there was any problem getting it counted and so forth.
Now, since we last talked, the census report was issued, and our state gained, I think, 2.7% in population over the last decade, which is a bit behind the national trend, although Louisiana did not lose a congressional district. You and I are old enough to remember when we had 8 U.S. congresspeople. Now we have 6. Are we in a position to reverse this trend of not keeping up with the rest of the country when it comes to population growth?
Well, I sure hope so. It was sort of an interesting census result because we stayed in exactly the same position relative to all the other states.
25th.
25th. So we have as many states with more population than we have going into the census, and as many states with less population. And we did have that small growth, which is certainly better than a decline. I think the birth rate has fallen all over the country, and that's certainly the case here in Louisiana. And I also believe, and I haven't really seen the detailed analysis here, if you look at the number of very serious disasters, hurricanes and so forth, that have hit our state, that cause people to have to move it, and they may think it's temporarily at first, but not all those people come back. And I think that plays a role in this as well. And look, I'm the first to admit we have challenges in Louisiana and have had them in a lot of areas, healthcare and education, and have had them for generations. And we're trying every day to make progress. I believe we are making progress, but we want to make this a place where people don't want to leave and where people want to move to.
Now, to one side of us, Texas grew as big as any state in the country and got 2 more congressional seats, now up to 40 electoral votes. But on the other side, Mississippi actually lost population.
Right. And again, it's sort of, that's another example of how we're sort of right in the middle on all these census issues. It is heartening that we did not lose a member of Congress. because, your clout as a state in Congress is all about numbers, and it really is. And so to make sure that we have the 6 members of the House of Representatives in addition to the 2 senators that every state has, I think is really important for us.
Will you get involved to a large extent in the reapportionment, redistricting process?
Oh, sure. And the census was delayed for a number of reasons, getting us the information. In fact, we still don't have the information. I had a call with the census folks about a month ago, and it will be the end of September before we have the data at the level that we can actually use it to draw new districts and to reapportion. But yeah, that's something that I'll take a keen interest in. I just think it's important you have to have fair districts. Voters should select their leaders. Leaders shouldn't select their voters.
Before we go back to the phone lines, there was a move in the Louisiana legislature to switch to a closed primary system, at least in federal elections, and we did that in 2008. We've never gone back to a closed primary in statewide elections since 1975. Governor, do you have a preference?
I do. I prefer open primary, state and federal. I think we have the system right now. It is one of those many instances where we're different than most of the rest of the country, but in this case, I'm confident we've got it right. The voters get their chance to select from among all the people who run. And if more than half the voters vote for the same candidate in the primary, it's over. And if they don't, there's a runoff between the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party. And I just don't know how to be fairer than that to the candidates or to the voters. And obviously, I was elected governor twice under that system,
Right.
so I have some confidence in the results that it produces. So I would want us to keep the open primary. And I believe the bill that would have changed that for federal elections has been put on the shelf. I don't think Senator Hewitt is going to run that bill through the process this year.
Rebel in Baton Rouge. Hi, Rebel. You're on with Governor Edwards.
Hi. Thank you, Jim, and thank you so much, Governor. Governor, I just wanted to say that for my money, you are probably the best governor of my lifetime, and I'm 54 years old, so that maybe doesn't say a lot for Louisiana, but I wanted to thank you for the job you're doing. And my question, sir, is what efforts are being made by the Democratic Party and yourself to prevent the Republicans from gerrymandering in the redistricting effort that they're going to be moving to, I guess, next year?
Well, Rebel, thank you very much for the call and for your kind comments. You and I are the same age, by the way. So the census data that's necessary in order to start the redistricting reapportionment process won't be available to us until the end of September this year. That's much later than normal. I believe you can anticipate a special session of the legislature either late this year or early next year, where all the districts will be redrawn according to that census information. And I'm going to work very hard with legislators, Republican and Democrat, House and Senate, in order to make sure that we have a fair process, because too often you have people who are elected choosing who their voters are going to be rather than the voters choosing who is going to represent them. And so we want districts that make sense, that are fairly drawn. And at the end of the day, I believe that the people who serve should basically look like the people who are being served. And I think that's really important if we're going to have the best possible government and if we're going to have credibility with the people that we govern.
Ray in Prairieville. Good afternoon, Ray. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Thanks for taking the call, Jim. Question is on infrastructure. I'd like to know what we are planning on doing on new roads. I live just off Old Perkins subdivision, and there is 0 sidewalks, road paths, whatever. Anybody who wants to go to the local Walmart, which is a quarter mile away, has to walk, take their life in their hands, trying to walk alongside the roadside.
Ray, thank you very much for your call. And I will tell you, infrastructure is a real challenge here, as it is in most of the country. We estimate we have a $14 billion backlog in projects. Now, we've been able to make a difference with over $4 billion invested thus far in my term. You may have seen the other day where we've announced $216 million in addition to our normal program this year from some stimulus funding, and with the American Rescue Plan funding over the next 2 years, I've asked for an additional $800 million above and beyond the normal program. And then we have infrastructure package taking shape, I should say, in Washington, and hopefully that's going to be passed as well. Now, Ray, I don't know where you live, whether you front a state road or the sidewalks you're talking about are on a city street or a non-state road. But obviously, we need to get more people walking, and we need to have more bike lanes as well. Get people off the road, but you also give them an opportunity to exercise and do it safely.
Chris in Point Capee. Chris, you were on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Well, thank you very much again. My question was about 190. I seen they finally did some improvements on by Irwinville where some of those bad bumps were. But why does it take so long to get some of that stuff taken care of?
Well, it's a lot to do with the answer I gave a while ago. It's a question of the funding that you have available and the needs, and then those needs have to be spread among across the whole state, and you have to have so much for preservation and maintenance on the one hand, and new capacity projects on the other. But I will tell you, 190 has been the focus of a number of investments since I've been governor, especially to improve safety, because I think, Chris, you'll know that there were many accidents where you had left-turning motorists that had to cut across 2 lanes of traffic, and the changes that we've made there have greatly enhanced the safety of the motorists. And it sounds like we made the changes that you were most recently interested in on 190 as well. But I'm not going to pretend that our transportation infrastructure is all that we want it to be. We're going to continue to work as best we can. And I am looking for solutions now to a lot of issues around transportation infrastructure, primarily roads and bridges, but also ports and airports and so forth. And that's why I've asked for more than $800 million in transportation to come out of the American Rescue Plan dollars, in addition to the $216 million that we've already committed out of previous stimulus dollars. That's an additional $1 billion above and beyond the normal program, because I think that it's that important for us.
Ike in Gonzales. Ike, good afternoon. You're on with Governor Edwards.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Governor, I think it was Rebel a couple of callers back. I echo his sentiments. You've been the best that I've seen in my 67 years. I've been on a campaign trail a couple of times.
Well, you're Jim Inkster's age then.
I'm not quite there, but,
Okay.
but I'm in between the two of you. But anyway.
Thank you, Ike. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But seriously, I've been on a campaign trail with you. But now, after these years, recognizing, sir, that our exposure to invocation of that curious and dangerous law, Louisiana Revised Statute 3051, turns on what's in the mind of our Attorney General.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Ike. I didn't. Go ahead.
Exposed, unless the DAs and the city attorneys become proactive.
Yeah, well, first of all, I know that this is an issue this big to you. You and I have had a number of conversations, and I see your letters to the editor and your emails and so forth. I'm not able to tell you what the Attorney General is thinking at any given time or what he's doing, but I will tell you that the statute that you referenced is on the books, and I would hope that the DAs and others are taking note of that and looking at it and try to see how they can use it to the advantage of the people that they represent.
Thank you, Ike. I mentioned Governor Edwards is one of the few governors in America to do a program of this kind, and now 5.5 years into the job. Do you like it?
I do. I like both the program and the job. Now, the job has been challenging, I will tell you, but every day I feel very fortunate to get up and to have a job that I love and working on behalf of a state and people that I love as well. And, to be able to do that and then to be reelected in a very tough campaign where the president who came down to campaign against me 3 times and won a year later by about 20 points or whatever it was, it just it makes it that much more special for me. But we have a great team. I will tell you, I enjoy working with the legislature, but the folks who served in my cabinet, and just the best people, and they all love this state, and every day is a true joy for me.
Well, you have 2.5 years left in your term, and then you're term limited. After that, I suspect, unless something changes, you'll be a lawyer and do other things. But you would have the option to come back at some point. Would you ever look at that if things evolved appropriately?
Jim, I made the mistake of sitting in this chair in about 2013. And you unexpectedly asked me if I was going to run for governor, and I said yes. And my phone started blowing up with calls from my wife on the spot, and so I learned my lesson that day. And I'm not gonna answer that question. I will tell you I don't anticipate that I would continue in public life in terms of elected office. I have a lot of contributions I want to make. There are other ways to make them, and I'm looking forward at the present to going back into the private sector.
What if a cabinet position were offered?
Well, look, I've always told people that, and I'm not saying this to give rise or credence to any rumors that are out there, because there have been no discussions at all about me leaving to go work for the president. But if the president of your country ever calls you and he or she asks you to come and serve, and they tell you that they believe that you can make a significant contribution, it's something you have to consider, and you have to have a compelling reason not to do it.
We're short on time, but the president is a Democrat, as are you, and he knows you're the only Democratic governor in the Deep South. That might preclude him from making an offer, even if he wanted to.
I think you might be right, but look, I worked really hard, raised and spent a lot of money to win this election, and there's still so much that has to be done in Louisiana, and I'm excited every day to do it, and so I'm not looking to leave. It would be extremely hard for me to do that, and there's been zero conversation. I haven't reached out. Nobody's reached out to me. I'm the governor, and I intend to do that for the rest of the term.
Well, we look forward to seeing you in June. Thank you, Governor.